And as the second day of the IV International Patria Colloquium continues, let's go live with our correspondent Belen de los Santos to know more about today's activities.
Exactly, we continue here at this fourth edition of the Patria Colloquium in the University of Havana. And as we have been saying throughout the day, also yesterday, the big topic of discussion here is how to weaving networks make our new narrative, a new way of telling our stories. And that is what the Global South is thinking about, how to put out there our new narratives. And we have been saying that this is not just a main discussion for media outlet, but this includes culture as a whole. This includes also art, and we are talking about filmography in particular now. We have been talking about it before because today one of the main events in the framework of this event, that is the fourth edition of Patria, is the screening of the 2024 documentary film Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. And we have the pleasure of being joined right now by its filmmaker Johan Grimonprez. Thank you so much, Johan, for joining us here in teleSUR English. And I would like to start by asking you, why is it important to have this screening showcased in the framework of this event that is discussing the possibility of showing new narratives into the world, of rethinking the way in which we tell our own stories?
Right, well, the film plugs into, of course, the whole idea of history. Voltaire used to say history is the common lie. No, history is the lie we commonly agree upon. And you might as well say her story or histories in plural. And so it's so crucial to sort of rewrite what that all means. You know, as J. Baldwin used to say, we are not our past. We are not actually, history is not the past. We actually are our history. And so the film plugs into a story that is set in the 1960s about the Global South, where in the United Nations during the 15th General Assembly there was a political earthquake where the Afro-Asian bloc, the Global South, gained a majority, and that caused consternation in East and West versus the Global South, where both East, and at the time it was Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, and at that point initiating the decolonization resolution, which is quite crucial, but it's hardly been talked about. And then the West, on the other hand, was sending arm twisters, basically CIA agents, on the territory of the international sort of side of the world body of the United Nations, buying up votes. They were CIA agents, and at the same time sending jazz ambassadors, using music as a propaganda tool to win the hearts and minds of the Global South. But the flip side of this, while the decolonization resolution is being proposed, will be sponsored by the Global South, ratified 14 December 1960, actually the flip side of that is that my country, because this film digs very much into the sort of a dark page out of the history of my country, which is wiped under the carpet, was that how the West was about to deal with this decolonization and this wind of independence blowing over the continent of Africa, was actually using murder and assassinate the first democratically elected Premier Patrice Lumumba, of which my country, in cahoots with the CIA, was involved. And so that story hasn't been told. But it ties into a lot of other sort of narratives that are dealing with the Global South. For example, you know, Fidel Castro was giving his first speech in 1960 at that 15th General Assembly, together with a lot of non-aligned leaders, amongst Indian leader Jawaharlal Nehru, the first independent leader of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, but also Fidel Castro gave his longest speech. It's still the longest speech in the history of the United Nations. But he was actually accusing and sort of advocating that Patrice Lumumba would be back put in government. But we could not source the name of Patrice Lumumba at the United Nations archives, so we had to come to Havana to actually find it here. And so again, we reinserted that there's sort of a rewriting of history, but also it tied into so many threats to the Global South. So
it's so interesting to think about how a lot of the things that are being discussed here at this event are tying together, right? We've been talking with our media partners from, for example, Pan-African TV, and how to rewrite and retell those stories, and in this case, how the arts and through a documentary, there's another story to be told. And as we're talking about the role of the arts in this, as you were saying, music plays a very important political part that your documentary highlights. Can you tell us a little bit more about how music becomes a political agent in this way?
Yeah, indeed. While I was researching for this film, I discovered that actually music very much was a historical agent. It's not just a soundtrack to a coup d'etat. It's the soundtrack to a political situation. And so it's as much also the rumba, which was actually sourced, it ties back into the 4th, 5th, 6th generation of Cuba, where Congolese made the transatlantic passage, reinvented the music, and the Congo was a big part of that, ended up as the cha-cha, which made its way back to the Congo, became a very political movement, this music. So much so that when Patrice Lumumba, for example, was put in prison because he was calling for independence, when he was flown over and upon demand from unanimously by all the Congolese political party at a round table where they're discussing independence, he was accompanied by the musicians. And so on the spot, when independence was claimed, they composed Independence Cha-Cha, and it became a huge, important anthem for the political movement within the continent of Africa. But not only the rumba, for example, there's also Louis Armstrong, right? And he was a jazz ambassador. He was sent about 1 month after the General Assembly, 15th General Assembly top, where he was used as a cover for actually what's happening underneath was the overthrow of Patrice Lumumba, but also subsequently the assassination. And so here you have sort of a very schizophrenic stance, but Louis Armstrong sent to defend democracy, while back at home there was in full fling of civil rights movement. They were not allowed to even vote because they were second-rate citizens. So the music, in a sense, sort of steps onto the political stage, but vice versa, the way we treated the politicians was that they were sort of becoming function in the editing as sort of lead singers to the jazz compositions as well. So they went back and forth.
That is definitely an experience to see, right? This documentary screened at this moment. And just before we end, Johan, I would like to ask you, you were just talking about, for example, the political significance of Fidel Castro's speech at that famous UN conference. What does it mean to you that this documentary is going to be presented now at one of the symbolic theaters, the Yara Theater here in Havana, nonetheless?
Right. Well, it's a bit of a homecoming, right? It's a bit of a homecoming. You have to know also what other feature, another big topic in the film is that Fidel Castro was thrown out of this hotel. And so Malcolm X invites him to Harlem, to the Hotel Teresa. But spontaneously what happens in Harlem, because suddenly, the whole situation of Harlem was suddenly thrown in front of the world media, and it actually made a cause also for what was going on within the United States, because it's still this whole civil rights movement. But spontaneously what you see is you have Abdel Nasser visiting Fidel Castro at the Hotel Teresa. They have an 80-minute talk on the sidewalk in Harlem. Jawaharlal Nehru, Indian leader, comes to visit him. Then we have Kwame Nkrumah as well at the same spot, which is 125th Street and 7th Avenue, which is sort of the spot of the Black Nation movement in the United States. And it's also the moment when Nikita Khrushchev, for the first time, is saying, I want to go visit Fidel Castro, actually to actually point at the fact how they treated the Cuban delegation, and also to put the spotlight on the black situation. And so you see Nikita Khrushchev and Fidel Castro embracing each other on the sidewalk at Hotel Teresa. So I think there's a lot of stuff that actually, in essence, that has not been in the spotlight, but I think to retell that story is, for me, well, it's special to have it here. It's like a homecoming. But not only that, there's much more to the film that also is so crucial today. And we talk in East Congo, occupation of East Congo, occupation of Gaza, and we can add Yemen, we can add Sudan. So it's not what the film focuses on. It's not sort of something of the past. Again, it's history, but a history that's very much alive, and it's something that should be talked about. And I think this forum is so much about this as well.
Exactly, and the challenge of thinking about these narratives with an intention of really being able to rewrite it from a Global South perspective. Thank you so much, Johan, for joining us in teleSUR English. It's been our pleasure, and the invitation is on today at Yara for soundtrack to a coup d'etat. And as we were thinking, the importance of thinking about these cultural artifacts as a way of rewriting history, and also doing that through a collaborative spirit. So that is all just for now, because we will continue bringing you the updates on the Patria Colloquium. Back to you, studio.
Thank you, Belen, for all the information. And with this report, we are going for a short break now. But first, remember, you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and more. We'll be right back. Stay with us.